We're good.
Good to go. Awesome. So welcome everyone. Brisbane Azure User Group. Be here just for the pizza. Now's the time. But otherwise, we've got some really interesting Azure stuff to talk about tonight. So welcome. Oh. Be okay. Right. It's just a long animation. So this event is being recorded. Are the room mics on?
Yep, they are.
Okay, so if you whisper, we will hear it and publish it. So be aware. It is May, so if you're here for another month, that's unfortunate. But if you're here for May's presentation, we got some interesting stuff for you. But before we get into the main event, we've got a few things. Big thank you out there to our sponsors. So Codify and Microsoft. Without these guys, this wouldn't be possible. So Codify for the beer and pizza, Microsoft for the facilities. So thank you very much, guys. And if you need a hand with anything to do with Azure, check out Codify. They are really good guys. All right, so it's a community event, and we want to make sure that you feel welcome here. Anybody's welcome to contribute and join into the conversation. We're really keen to get people to do presentations, and it doesn't have to be a massive presentation. If you've just got a small one, it's okay. We can get a couple of people together and do a couple of small presentations. But let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We just want to hear about what you're doing. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the community involved and hearing how you're using Azure, preferably Azure, right? Like, just keep it on topic. So it is about Azure. And if you've got something you want to say, let us know. We would love to hear it. We've got an email address down there below, so let us know. All right, there's just a couple of updates that have happened here. Azure Container Registry, a whole bunch of improvements around container registry. So capacity, it's a lot bigger than what it was. It's got geo-replication as well for all the registries above 20 terabytes. And then from a performance perspective, that's 10x faster. So that's great news for those people that have container registry. Azure Monitor Pipeline at the edge in preview. So you can now join some of your stuff that's not in Azure at the edge. So in potentially at your where you have your data centers, where you have IoT things, you can start getting them into the Azure Monitor pipeline. So high scale data ingestion and with data loss prevention. So it's a reliable communication for those monitoring events. Spring Apps. Is anyone else doing Spring Apps here? Anyone? No, just me. Okay, that's cool. So Azure Spring Apps. Good news for, it seems like just me. It's now cheaper if you want to get a 3-year commitment. Virtual Network Manager, user-defined route management. It's a mouthful. So basically, you can now define and apply those routing rules to multiple subnets and virtual networks without manually configuring the route tables for each subnet. So that's something worth investigating if you're spending a lot of time in the networking space. And this is, I thought this happened a long time ago, but maybe it wasn't for everyone. So the root management group is rolling out to every Azure subscription out there. So that's just a structure of how you're managing your Azure subscriptions for yourselves. And that's, if it's not there already, it's been in mind for quite a while, but if it's not there already, it's going to appear in your Azure subscriptions. So you can no longer avoid having a tenant root group. Sorry, just on that previous one, don't fear it. It's a good thing. So it just helps you manage stuff. It's not going to disrupt anything at all. Azure Change Analysis. There's a new portal experience that allows you to do better searching and there's the new filter and group by and change actor, and that sort of spans all of your Azure. So you can actually see what's going on. So that's a really good feature. Bunch of stuff for Azure Cosmos. Sorry, this slide's super boring. Lots of writing. But really simply and at a high level, Cosmos DB, we've got an index advisor that's kind of like going to go, hey, have a look at this, have a think about this. For there's also HNSW. I feel like I've used this in the past. I never actually knew what that standard for, so I put that name there. It's like hierarchical navigatable small world vector index. People are nodding like they know what that is. That's okay. I didn't. So in vCore based Azure Cosmos, so that's pretty cool. So that does all your nearest neighbor searches, great handling and query dimensional data. It's really good. And then before that, you can also do a filtered vector search. So you can do a pre-filter on the HNSW, and then that will allow you to reduce the amount of records that you're looking at in Cosmos. So that's pretty cool. Azure Data Box hardware disk encryption. I've tried really hard to find a little icon, a little image for this. It looked terrible, so I just put nothing there. But there's now hardware encryption in those Azure data boxes for Linux, not for the Windows ones. But AES 256, so that's pretty cool. Azure Monitor log search alerts support managed identities now. I might be going, why do I really need that? It's a good question. There are some features of Azure that if you want to try and use them, you probably will need a managed identity to access them. So that's things like Azure Data Explorer, Resource Graph. So now those monitor log search alerts can run with that identity and access those other Azure resources. Azure Event Grid supports Last Will and Testament. I love that name. It's really cool. And it's kind of doing something pretty cool, but the name's way better than the functionality. So if you're just looking at the name, you can just like leave it there. It's really cool. But that's when you've got those consumers of that event grid. When your client that's sending those messages unexpectedly disappears, well, we've got like a final last will and testament. That sounds really cool when I say it. But anyway, they can go to those consumers. So the consumers know something bad's happened. All right, that's pretty much it for the news of the month. There's a few other things I just kind of went, not really interested, but that's my take on it. Couple of things coming up. So there are some events. Brisbane Data Analytics and AI Bootcamp. There may be somebody speaking. So that's really cool. So that's coming up Saturday, May 18th. And there's the link that you can go to sign up. There's currently some available spots.
Maybe a few. It was sold out, and they just released 20 extra tickets as of the day ago. How many of them are left? I don't know. But if you're interested, get on there quick. Yeah.
So if you're online watching it, you've probably got a really good chance. If you're in this room, probably tough luck unless you get onto that phone really quick. Also, importantly, we've got Build coming up. So feels like that was only yesterday, but another year. May 21st to 23rd.
That is free online.
Free online.
Free if you attend in person.
It might cost you a few dollars to get there as well.
And pay the ticket.
And the ticket. But online, it's going to have some great stuff. So I think we're all looking forward to that, for sure. And then another really important, shall we say, event for a certain person in this room. So if you're interested in attending this virtually, you can. So London, I got that right, didn't I?
It is London.
It is London. Okay, sorry. If you're willing, if you're like some people who want to go there, that's really cool too. But you can attend this virtually. So it could be like a late night fun opportunity. Yeah, check that out. And as always, just a few resources that we've got. So we've got a Slack channel, we've got YouTube channel. Here's a couple of learning opportunities if you're interested in. A couple of blogs that are pretty cool. So Scott and the Azure blog, really cool. And tonight, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Alastair Wilkinson.
You weren't going to use that, Dan.
I had to find this online because Dan normally puts the photo in. So I went scouring the internet for this one. And I found this photo and I went, yep, that's him. So
That was about 2/3 of the way into a trail marathon in New Zealand. I was absolutely bugged.
it's a bit like security, right?
Yes.
So tonight we're going to learn a little bit about IaC and using Terraform and deploying VMs in virtual networks and internet, NAT gateway, one of my personal favorites, and Azure Route Table and Firewall. So
All of the above. And Ernest, you ladies, join me for a. I'm putting my jumper because I'm always cold in this room. Do some setting up. Huzzah. I'm Alastair. First of all, I spoke to Dan Daly and said, I work at Griffith Uni. We've just started the first cybersecurity course in Queensland. Can I spruik it? I'm going to be hitting you all up on other meetups I go to over the next few months saying student placements, student placements, student placements. But rather than me do all the talking tonight, Professor Ernest Fu, please have a quick chat about your course.
I will. Thank you so much for inviting me here and giving me space to be able to talk about this new degree that we've put together. So, like Alastair said, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, we're the first Queensland university to offer a Bachelor of Cybersecurity, and I think it's pretty unique. It's going to be run out of our Gold Coast, Nathan, and South Bank, as well as online courses. And we started at the beginning of this year, and we got 72 enrollments of very little advertising. So it looks like there's people out there who are thinking cybersecurity might be the way to go for them. So just some information. It's just a standard bachelor's degree, but the way that everybody here can help with the course is that in the final year of the course, we require students to do work placements, and then of course when they finish, they will all need jobs. So hopefully as they go through, they'll actually learn things about networks and about Azure as well, I guess, and they'll hopefully be useful to you. I think one of the things that we find for normal graduates everywhere is that they do the 3 years, but they're not really ready to hit the workplace running, right? So we really need people like yourselves to give them an opportunity, to give them some work experience, some graduate placements, to give them an experience, and then hopefully they reward you with loyalty and hard work and working for your organization. So I just realized, while we're talking about Azure, that we actually use Azure, and I think of the 3 big universities in Southeast Queensland, we're the only one that actually uses Azure as our cyber range. So we actually use a product called Azure Lab Services. I'm not sure if everyone knows about them, but we use that, and we use nested virtualization to actually be able to set up a cyber target for them to practice inside that. So yeah.
Oh, so you'll realise how pertinent but I'm nagging you over the next few months. The course is cool. Thank you very much,
Thanks
Ernest.
so much, Alastair. Thank you.
Dan and Damien, thank you very much for that. Okay. You all get to listen to me now. I'm glad that came up. Very, very quickly, this really isn't going to be death by PowerPoint. There's a few actually Google slides because I still have a Google subscription, but death by slide. Loads of Terraform-based deployments, loads that can go wrong. And if it does, you all are up. You've all got to spot the errors, help and work with me. And this is very much in the spirit of live demo. It's not death by PowerPoint. If it goes wrong, we all join in. I meant to give it good questions, get chocolate. Really good questions, get posh ones. That doesn't mean going to the bottomless pit of things I don't know. If you ask me a question I don't know, it's just going out to the floor. But yeah, jump in with questions as you want to go. So just my background in cloud and Azure, probably 5 years working in Azure now. Not full time, but very, very much of the focus. I have a number of certs, the AZ-104, sysadmin, the 500 security. I've just done the networking one, so I ought to be qualified with this. I did scrape it in the end. First one I've done open book. We were talking about that the other week. It's quite interesting having access to Microsoft Learn in the exam. Anyway, enough about me. All right. Quick acknowledgements. How we got here. It's not all about Griffith Uni, but I'm using their laptop because it had Teams on it. Love my team there. Very, very, what's the word? Some teams just lift you up and you do better work. They're like that. Well, I haven't seen Wayne Hoggett here for a long while. He's still around though. He still messages me. He should have done this talk. A lot of the knowledge from this, when I started working in a Terraform shop, came from some of his stuff on the Cloud Guru. So I do need to acknowledge that. Haven't seen him in a long while. If you're listening online, Wayne, thank you. Hence your our Wayne. You need to come down here and have a beer and have a yarn. Interested, John Saville. Who knows who John Saville is? Geez, I watch his YouTube stuff a lot. He's very, very good. I think he's working for Microsoft again.
Yeah,
I swear he should be on the resources thing. I think there's a reason he's not.
that's a good point. We'll make that change.
Just
Sure.
If you want to learn about Azure stuff, once you come here and you get to listen to me and you get beer and pizza, watch John Saville's. Many, many others. Particularly, I'm in a security team. We're very much a community. We have to work as a team or things go very, very badly wrong. So, Tim, thanks for coming. I've certainly stood on your shoulders over the years. So we're getting to the demos soon, but scene setting. What we are going to talk about. Basics of IaC, infrastructure as code. We're not going to go into any depth because when I thought about this, what we want to cover is lots and lots of demos. I'm going to link you all to the repo. It's not brilliant Terraform. When I say not brilliant, it wouldn't scale well. You wouldn't run an enterprise on this Terraform. There's many changes you want to make. But if you want to proof of concept things, what we were talking about before the talk, myself and Damien, if your organization is tempted to just go, we're going to lift and shift the virtual machines, do some proof of concept. Please don't do that. You're saying everyone has to go through that once or several times, and then they go, we'll never. But if you're starting out your journey and moving out of a data center into cloud, don't do a few things in the pool. Don't do ClickOps. Start using infrastructure as code. Do some proof of concept work. Figure out how much things cost. Figure out where you can re-architect. And I'm not touching on that. So this is the journey you would go to go down that path. So no deep dives. We're going to only touch on Terraform state. Terraform isn't like Bicep. You have a concept of your state, which you have to store somewhere. Tonight, it's just going to be on my laptop. That doesn't work or scale well if you've got a team of developers. There can be secrets in that Terraform state. You have to be very, very careful who can access, who can extract data out of it. We're not going to touch on that beyond me. Acknowledgement that there is a state file, you have to be very careful with it. And you wouldn't do this manually on a laptop. You make this as part of a pipeline with built-in tests, and I'll touch on those. So we're really proof of concept work, making sure we understand how the networking works, which would lead into things you would do in production. Don't do ClickOps ever, ever, ever. Maybe the first time you're looking at a new resource. Then figure out how to do it as code. I'll just talk about this slide. I promise the slides end soon. I'm going to talk WAF, the well-architected framework. Coming to, again, reason for this talk and times I've been involved in lift and shift projects. It's a daunting thing, I think, looking at the well-architected framework. It doesn't have context, doesn't make sense if you are doing your first cloud project. You have to do this before that starts to make sense, and then look at re-architecting workloads if you're going to move things from an on-prem data center into the cloud. There are links to the well-architected framework. I said I'll provide a text-based QR code at the end, link to the repo so you can have a look at all my code. Please jump on my GitHub repo, tell me where it's rubbish, fork it, do whatever you want with it. If you want to put a pull request in it and make some changes, go for it. So as I've learned my slides, I'm jumping ahead. So enough talking, because I'm going to try to fit in a shed load of live demos without putting you all to sleep. So we're going to deploy something very, very simple. So let me go to, we're in PowerShell. It's in the directory there. I'm going to clone a repo. That's where I'm going.
It's not a Terraform command, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's not a Terraform command.
Oh, you've got to start somewhere. Trusty old Visual Studio Code. Quick look at some Terraform files before we press fire. Terraform will interpret anything that's got a TF at the end of it. And we're not doing a deep dive. We set up what's called a provider because Terraform doesn't just work in Azure. If you want to learn Terraform, there are some excellent tutorials on the website. Sadly, soon to be, I shouldn't say that, soon to be IBM's website, probably. You will have to have an AWS account to do the tutorials. They're all AWS based, but you will learn the structure of the language. And some very basic resources, resource group, virtual network. So the reason for the what I've called .stage files is the Terraform command won't see those until we rename the files. Now, what I need is the text big enough? I actually looked up and learned how to embiggen the text because I didn't know that until just before this evening.
Control plus.
Control equals in.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that any better?
Plus control minus. Yeah, which is control. Yeah. That's
Okay. Terraform commands. Don't start with Terraform fly. You have to download the provider, Terraform init. There's a Terraform plan command where you can output to a file and take a look at things. It's very, very useful. Use it. We're not going to because we're trying. Sorry?
Do you? use Terraform plan.
Sometimes.
Yeah, because I found that like using Terraform plan is not really helpful because of the infrastructure drift. And by the time you want to apply something that you've planned maybe a few hours ago, it's already not that useful.
Output the file and use the file in your Terraform apply. You won't get that drift.
Yes, it's not the drift that's in the plan, that drift that happened outside of it.
Oh, you just need to shoot your devs then. So I'm deploying virtual machines. I'm being asked for a password. After I've done this deployment, I'm going to do something and say, never ever do this. You'll see in a mo. And there is I'm going to put a branch. I'm in a security team. One of my team said, with genuine horror, why are you using passwords of SSH? Why aren't you using keys? And I said, sorry, Marco. Demonstrating networking stuff. So there will be a branch that's going to this repo that's going to use a key vault and all the SSH keys that you will have to access via Azure Bastion. We're coming to that. I don't know what that is. I'm sure most people here do. We're going to deploy it later. And your private key will never be on the machine. It'll be locked in Microsoft soft HSM, hidden away. That's coming. But in the short term, for the purpose of demonstration, don't do this at home. So I put in a password. I'm going to let that run. And Terraform apply and the subsequent Terraform destroy that's coming will ask me for a confirmation. You can put it's -- auto -approve, auto approve. You can avoid that. But it's good to have a look at what's being deployed. And we're going to add 6 resources here. Right, that's right. The bit.
Look at the just above the like both chambers. It might be interesting for people that are less familiar.
You can probably expand the terminal or the
Yeah.
window using the second right button.
Yeah,
That one?
Yeah.
Scroll up. So this is the output from a Terraform apply. In a real world, you would look at this in some more detail than I did, and it will essentially summarize the details of all of your deployment. I've jumped ahead on my script because there was a change I was meant to make here, I think. Which is going to speed up the talk, but what I intended to do before going Terraform apply, performance anxiety, you see those commands on screen. I'm going to get one into the room. I put a comment in there which was meant to remind me, but I didn't look. If I do this, there's chocolates at the end of this question, and save it, and there's a clue in the comment, and run my Terraform apply, what'll happen? Questions to the floor.
To tell you the difference between the real application or real resource and the
Because you can't downgrade the resource, it will destroy it and recreate.
It will, yes. You can't. You can do something. You can unbind the public IP address and rebind. I don't know how to do that in code. There's no data on this. If I ran that, I would destroy it. What will be the outcome of commenting out that skew line?
Which will use the default value, which is implied is basic.
And what happens if you today? This is worth quite a chocolate. If you deploy with a basic public IP address in Azure, what is the, let me think of that, networking features of a public IP address? And I'm in the security team, so I'm very interested in this.
I'm not 100% sure, but I would say it will change when the VM is shut down.
It will do. No, where that's going is when this is a variation talk I did for a security team, and they were in the main ex-university Unixes. So they had a good handle on TCP/IP, and there's things that make perfect sense. TCP/IP makes sense to them. And the idea that the public IP address is a separate resource is bizarre to somebody from the Unix background. In the default world of public IP today, it changes next September. I'm sure it is next September.
I thought it was this year, actually. In terms of that.
There's a link in my slides. It's just changed.
Could be right, yeah.
The difference between the two is the basic SKU is world open. If I ran that code, we would deploy a VM with SSH open to the world and just the password. Don't ever do that. That's a terrible thing to do. That was a terrible thing to do in the 2000s, possibly even the 1990s. And I did this talk before. I called this bit, beware of defaults. They can catch you out in a way that won't necessarily do on-prem. Nobody got a chocolate for that one. Not even the posh ones. Now, you do have to take my word for that, because I meant to deploy it and then show it being world open. What will happen with this deployment that I'm doing is, actually, this is another question worthy of a chocolate. So I've deployed a virtual machine. Hands up who, you know what a network security group does in the Azure. Wow, good question, Ted. No network security group. What is a standard IP address going to do? Anyone know? Opposite, I'll give you a clip. Opposite of a basic. Okay, close to the entire world. Unless you explicitly open it with a network security group, which we haven't done. We won't be able to SSH these virtual machines. Which I messed up the script of my talk. So you won't actually see that until the next stage, and I had to talk about it. So we're going to go back to there. And the good thing is I'll stay ahead of time. So if we scroll down, no, not there, we should have added 6 resources. Terraform outputs. You can tell Terraform to output things. They would have more use in more advanced Terraform. All I'm doing is sending them out to the screen because it's quite handy. In theory, but we can't, because I set it up so it's close to the entire world. We should be able to SSH that public IP now. Just by way of a little bit of proof that we have actually deployed something. We created a resource group called VMRG. And we have virtual machine, disk, virtual network with a subnet lurking inside it, public IP, network interface, and resources. Terraform said 6 because it counts the subnet that's hiding inside the virtual network. We won't go back and SSH to those. We're going to move on. No. Questions? Chocolates are up for grabs. Make sense? Too fast, too slow? I'm going to take silence as all good.
Should we do var file? Or like,
Yeah, sure.
so you had to supply the password variable to the command line because it was not like.
Yes. And I said I was going to do this.
Because there is no default.
And I said, never do this at home. And it's the year on the end. Mind you, doing that, so you don't have to watch me type it in with each deployment. That is truly because if we did a git push now, that's now sitting in our repo. We really don't want things like that. Tim, you're looking twitchy that I've done that.
Is there a, being a hashing fork product, is there a way to put secrets involved into the vehicle? What do you do?
I was going to broaden that question in terms of, I guess, like what are the typical ways that you would actually supply a password from a pipeline deployment securely?
In the Azure world, I would look to use the key vault. It's a question I've asked you on a previous talk. Use the differential between using GitHub secrets, which you would tend to use to authenticate your pipeline so it can actually do things. And then what you're running in the pipeline is using a key vault within Azure to grab secrets and key certificates to do what you want to do. And I said earlier, in this particular demo, what we're doing here, I'm going to put a branch into this repo with the code that will go off and say, hey, grab out of a key vault for authentication. Don't do things as ridiculous as I've just done there. It's me pretending this is just a network talk. Please don't ever do that. It's a terrible thing to do. Obviously, I'm not going to clone this back to my repo or ever use that password again. Just so you don't have to watch me typing. So in this particular case, it would be the key for SSH authentication being grabbed via a key vault. And I wouldn't even have the private key for my authentication sitting on my own laptop in this case. We're going to say, anyone without authorization able to get to this key. So I'm going to put in the key vault. I'm going to have RBAC rules on that particular key. And when we do a demo of Bastion later, I'll show you, although I don't have one, you can go and pick a key vault. And only if your user account in the portal has access to that particular resource can you access that key to get access to the virtual machine. If I covered your question?
Yeah, that's good answer.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to deploy a couple more things.
There is a project for HashiCorp called Vault, exactly for storing secrets.
Yeah.
But the injection into Terraform is very much the same. You either use the Terraform eVault or Secrets Manager, whatever you use, or the Vault provider, and you inject them in your pipeline. Not so it's a variable, but it's a secret from the Vault.
We're going to add some extra resources. I'm going to add a virtual machine without a public IP address. And I'm going to have to eat a lot of chocolate. So put your heads up over the parapet. Guess if necessary. Looking at that. Right. This machine on the left already exists. We're going to deploy another one. Second one on the right, as you guys look at it, doesn't have a public IP address. I've drawn an arrow out to the public internet. Is that valid? Will it be able to access the internet outbound? Lots of nods. Sir, if you answered the question.
I didn't hear that.
You did, you nodded. You were right. Yes, again, this is what's changing next year, default outbound access of virtual machines. There's an implied NAT that exists with those. It is astonishing how often that catches people out. How many deployments I've seen on that can access outbound? No, can't. It does catch a lot of people, and it's changing next year. Now, I'm going to throw this out, so I'll keep looking at you, but my reading of that is it's not changing for existing deployments. Any virtual, it's only for new ones after, I think it's September next year, and I do have the link in here.
It's a good question. Not 100% sure on that. I'm pretty sure it's a flag, but I think the intent is to default all new deployments. I'm pretty sure
That's
the case.
My reading of it. So watch out for this one.
But the other note on the basic IP address though is that basic IP addresses are deprecated as well. And I'm pretty sure they are getting, like you can't create them like this year sometime.
That's actually good. What I said about if it's got a TF extension, Terraform will process it. If I wasn't winging it quite so much, I would have done this, then gone to the slide. But hey, let us, so we can deploy a second virtual machine and a network security group. As no one put their hands up very quickly, network security group is really just network layer controls. Source address, destination address, protocol, 5 tuples, direction. Can this device, host IP address, talk to this one? As I described earlier with the standard IP address, that's closed to everything unless we explicitly open it. Now, more chocolates up for grabs. We're defining a network security group. That line, I've sounds like a magic show. I've never connected my laptop here before, so I'm on a just public IP address. I don't actually know what it is. Out to the audience, what do we have to do? What does that line refer to?
Refers to a variable in the variable
Yes.
file.
Now, that happens to be where I was working when I wrote the code. But that's not going to work from here. So we're going to make some changes. Now, when I was talking to Dan before, I had no idea. We're deploying Linux machines. I want to be able to connect to the via SSH, which is TCP port 22. I actually had no idea whether Microsoft have outbound firewall rules that I can't connect to anything and say other than web ports. So we're going to do this from, there's a lot that could go wrong here. I'm going to be calling on you guys. Cloud Shell. I almost deployed another Bastion just to do the connection, but that's expensive. So what's my IP address? And this could go badly wrong because I don't know if this changes. Again, people familiar with Azure Cloud Shell, very useful tool. A lot of nods, that's good. So I'm going to do the SSH and the demos of what connects from here, but I need to allow my Cloud Shell access. So I've got to change my code. Fair warning, this bit has gone wrong in my run throughs and I haven't been able to connect, at which point we all have to troubleshoot. That makes sense to it. That's, if we're talking about Azure networking, that is a really, really, really crucial key concept of what NSG is. And I'll show it when it's deployed, I'll go and show it in the portal and it's a bit more obvious in the GUI. That makes sense what we just did. Essentially, we're just saying this IP address is allowed access into our virtual network. Make sense? Very, very key. The sanity check, I've changed the right names. NSG VM2. No, not there. Down here. And huzzah, you don't have to watch me type a password. Again, please don't do that.
And you haven't because you specified a default value.
Sorry?
You haven't saved your variables.
Oh, that's going to go badly wrong.
I think it might have been the last. Let's see.
Oh, I think where I typed, yeah. If it doesn't ask for a password, I have saved it.
All right.
But I guess
It's not the first time I've gone and done something stupid like that. Why is it not working?
I'm the master of run, and I haven't saved it in.
Yes.
Sorry, question.
Yeah, to answer the question before, yeah, so from September, then existing workloads must be affected, all new workloads will be.
Cool, thank you very much, Ben. So Bernie, just confirming September next year?
Yeah.
That default outbound access from a public IP is disappearing next year, but only for new workloads. Your existing ones will still have it. Even if you don't, I've worked on projects where people haven't realized it's a thing. Okay. Let me flick back to, so with a bit of not having a pointer, mouse wiggling, deploying a network security group. And network security groups, you can, I use the term bind, attack, bind is probably the right word, to a subnet being a sub-resource of a virtual network in the Azure world, or direct, I've actually drawn it on the corner of the VM. It's actually bound to the NIC. Normally you wouldn't do both, but for the purposes of illustration tonight.
So I didn't see this binding in the Terraform code.
Oh, let's go and find that. Absolutely. It's not in the variables files. Oh, nice, quick. So we weren't really deploying much in the way of compute. That's gone nice and quickly. So we define.
There we go. Association. Below.
That's the word I was looking for. Binding, association. Like a I can't say it, thesaurus. So the code I've just shrunk defines my very basic network security group and an allow rule. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to SSH anywhere. And an association, the correct term, with network interface, and subnet, as I drew in the picture.
For the network interface, it's the public IP that gets associated, but the network security group is applied directly to the subnet, not to the NIC, as far as I can see. Right.
To the subnet, and the NIC, the public IP, and its own internal IP will get it. And there are NSG rules. If you have them in both places, I'm gonna spruik Wayne again. I think there's dollars. He does a really excellent. Get it in the Black Friday sale. He hasn't put me up to this, honest. He does an escape room course on one of his plural cycle cloud guru, and goes through figuring out where there are areas in network security groups, because the flow is important. And I can't remember at the moment. I'd have to look it up.
So if you found it to both directions, is it stable? So
Yes. Yeah.
So do you have to bind them to both the
No.
subnet and the IP and the NIC?
No, I've done it for the purpose of illustration because they can be bound to either. I've seen in lift and shift migrations I've been involved in where design will replace a host-based firewall, say on a Linux server, Firewall D, for example, IP tables, with an NSG, and you can. It's not quite the same. It's operating in a different place. If you picture where an NSG is working, and I haven't got a slide for this, people think of it as being like a host-based firewall, and it's not. It's more. Its behavior is if it's actually sitting. If you picture a virtual network and a virtual Ethernet cable going to your NIC, it's at the virtual network port, not a host-based firewall. And you think of it there, and then you think about the flow of data coming out, because you can inbound and outbound rules, data coming out of, say, a virtual machine or compute of some kind. It's hitting the rule there, it's outbound rule there, not at the operating system, and there's differences. let me, we will be here. Long while. Where's my IP address? Oh, I've got two. That's interesting. This could go wrong.
Both the same.
They're both the same, yeah. I've never seen it produce two for me before. Well, let's see where we get to. Oh, I'm glad that worked. Huzzah. So it looks as though we haven't done anything. We're gone from Cloud Shell with SSH to a virtual machine. And forgive me, I think Linux VMs, I found it easier to set up and do this than do Windows ones. So we're going to, everyone familiar with that command? We're just going to ask it what its IP address is, public IP address. So let's, oh, that worked. And you can see there, if we go back to our Terraform, 248.26, we're hitting the internet via our public IP address. But what about this host? What IP, if I run that same command, that same curl ifconfig.me on there, what do you reckon we'll see there? More chocolates.
Whatever the net gateway is.
Good answer. You're too far away. I'm not going to throw it. That would be the height of rudeness. So if we come, where have I gone? Back to here. And I hope this is right, but I'm pretty sure I know what my subnet addresses are. And we won't actually log them because then you can see the two the same. We want silent curl. And we're just going to put a return at the end of that. So we're going to get all of that rubbish. The password, wish I was using keys. Totally different public IP address. We have no control. We don't know what that is until we go and look. We have no control over it. Again, disappearing in September next year. So I think we've got those two virtual machines sitting in subnets beside each other, both accessing the internet in different ways. Matt.
What happens if you add a second host to that subnet that doesn't have a public IP?
The one we're just connected to doesn't have a public IP. If I show you the, it's probably the best way to see it. And I'll go into the portal and show you there's only one public IP deployed.
I think he was asking if it would have the same NAT gateway address, or is it like a one-to-one NAT?
Oh, that's a really good question. You get a posh one. Pass that over to Matt, please. I don't know. So, yeah. Pass them around. What a really, yeah. Anyone know?
It's probably the pool that it uses, but
Yeah, there would be a pool that uses. I'm not going to do it tonight because you don't want to watch me copying code and changing names, but I will fire up another VM in that subnet and test it. And see
Yeah,
what it gets.
that is the answer. So the answer is that basically, if you don't have a public IP address assigned, it'll basically when it initiates a connection out, it'll basically be assigned from a pool IP. But there's like a whole bunch of like IP ranges that then Microsoft will assign to that. So it could be random. You can't control it. And so from that perspective, that if you have something on the receiving end that needs to know what that IP address is and have like it consistent, then you really do need to like assign a public IP address to it.
Thanks, Bernie. I promise I didn't put Matt up to this, but that segs really nicely. We're going to add a NAT gateway. Last thing on that, if you have that, what I'll call describe as a non-level of control over how resources in your virtual networks are accessing the internet, it's really hard to control things like DLP. It's really hard to control if you get any kind of malware that's establishing an outbound connection. You might have really strict inbound rules into your virtual networks. But if you can get something that's going to form a tunnel out, everything bad can come back up it. So it's a very, very undesirable situation to have internet activity where you don't even know where it's coming from. That would be, I can't think of a way that you would log the activity of where that's going to, maybe off the operating system logs, or if you're running with something like Defender for endpoint on that particular host, so you're seeing all of the detailed OS logs. But it's very difficult to know what's going across those connections. And we're going to come to how you would address that. Now we're going to, these VMs will stay in place while we're deploying that gateway, but from, no, I don't want to do that. Experience, the deployment of that gateway will kill the connection as I've just done anyway. So hence I'll log out and log back in again. So next stage, let's have a look at now. Let's deploy first and look at the slide. Let's do it in a structured order. We're going to add a NAT gateway. NAT gateway is really, really what it sounds like. Point of access for all the VMs, you attach it to a subnet. And if you'll remind me, because I forget this bit, we'll go and look at the route table for the virtual NIC. And we'll see there's no change, which surprised me when I was first playing around and figuring out how this worked. It's just bound to a subnet, and it takes on that role that we've just seen defaulted with an IP address that we don't control. Easy to show than to talk about, perhaps. So let's go. We've renamed that. So let's go Terraform. I've really got to stop doing that bit. Why?
Show the file, please, while it's at live.
Yes, let's do that. NAT gateway. Have that so I can type yes. So what we deploy for a NAT gateway. The NAT gateway itself. We're going to associate it with a subnet. So that resources in that subnet will access the internet across this NAT gateway. And we've associated this with both of our subnets. And a NAT gateway needs a public IP address, which needs to be associated with the NAT gateway. And Terraform output we've described because I want to see what I do with my, I want to see its IP address for reference at the end. See, there's actually not very many lines of code in defining that. If we were doing this in production and we've gone down the path of a well-architected framework, we'd probably have more requirements particularly in enterprise organization controls. We might want to set up some logging for that, for example. So very, very basic code, but there's not a lot to it. And when I was talking earlier about if you're doing proof of concept work, don't do ClickOps. You can't reproduce easily what you've done. You can't tear it down easily. I'll show you at the end of this particular part of the demo. We'll do a Terraform destroy, and all of this will go, and I'm no longer paying for it, which is important. Cost is one of the pillars of the well-architected framework. We don't want our dev systems chewing up money. So public IP, I need to go up a little bit. Looking for that IP address, 252.101 on the end. We haven't changed our VMs, I just disconnected from them. So effectively, we've had our 2 subnets VMs in, we've just added a NAT gateway and associated it. That's all happening by the Terraform state file I described earlier. So the Terraform will talk to the Azure API and go, hey, I've only got these changes to make. Oh, type the password. Okay. Same command again. 252.101. So this host, I can bring up the picture. This is the emergency name Terra stuff. I'm not sure why I call my VM that. As a public IP address, but we're no longer using that public IP. We're using it for SSHing to. It's we're using this as a jump host to get to the machine in the other subnet. Inbound access, but this host is accessing the internet via the NAT gateway now. Make sense from that IP address? Is the text big enough? In bigger than that?
Does it handle all the source-based routing for you, so it will come back?
I was hoping no one would ask that because I don't know. And I actually thought about trying to look that up and figure it out beforehand. You need to take another one of those. You two are on fire. You need to take another one of those chocolates. I don't actually know. Well, I kind of drew this out in my mind. I thought, yeah, how does it do that? Anyone else know that one? I'm going to look over there.
So yeah, like I guess just checking what the question is. So in terms of, are you more concerned about like asymmetric routing? Yeah. So in terms of, so for the outbound connection that's coming from the virtual machine, that will go through the NAT gateway, and from an external perspective, it'll be a stateful session out. And then so reply traffic will come back to that IP and then route back in. It is possible to like have other UDRs and stuff like that in the network to make that more challenging, but by default, it's just going to work. Yeah. So yeah, it should be fine. But in terms of, I guess, the point that Alastair was calling out, for inbound connections, that's got the public IP address. That's going to be, again, a different IP, but it's going to follow the same.
Yeah, so it will come out the same way when it gets.
Yeah, but you could go ahead and set up a UDR that says send all traffic back on premises, and then it would be, yeah, there would be a big problem there.
Oh, thank you, mate. We next stage. Oh, flying. I'm going to come to route tables and use defined routes. Segging beautifully. Just for the purpose of illustration, our host with no public IP address again. We've bound, if you can think back to our code, the NAT gateway to both subnets, so that's using it as well. Now, we're going to go to, better refresh that, there's a few more resources. When I say no ClickOps, you're allowed to look in the port. So don't do your deployments from here. There's some, particularly around troubleshooting networking, there is some very, very useful stuff. That's the one I want. This is going to be boring. It won't show anything. But when I first played this, as I said, this surprised me. I thought that the deploying a net gateway would change routing, but it doesn't. So I want you, please, just to keep that picture in your mind with what we're going to look at next. So that's something there's some quite handy tools for diagnosing faults because it's very, very easy in any kind of virtual network or physical network to get lost in why things can't talk, particularly if you're working on zero trust and principle of least privilege or principle of least access. So there's some very, very useful tools in the portal for figuring out why you might have different networks that can't talk if you know a different host that can't talk to each other. I thought I'd associated an NSG with that. What? We'll Huzzah. So obviously we have a very, very simple set of rules. We have based it on principal least access. We're not open to the entire world, just a single IP address that belongs to Microsoft because I'm using the Cloud Shell to access. Go me, principal of least access. And I haven't defined any outbound rules at all. You can obviously make those much, much, much more complicated to fit your use cases. Oh, right. Where are we up to? Just totally. Does anyone like me grew up in England? Anyone here? So I'm going to say here's one I prepared earlier, and that was a TV show that's still going and was going when I was a kid. So we're going to leap to a different. From the same repo. I ran this basically when I got here tonight and I got an internet connection. And the reason being because we're deploying an Azure Firewall and Azure Bastion. And when I've run through this and tested my code, this whole deployment, and I've time because if I scroll up a bit there, you might see, tells you how long it takes, how long it's been running. That has taken varied between 8 minutes and 35 minutes to deploy. And I would run out of material and just be walking around with the chocolates if it took 35 minutes tonight. So I fired this one off as soon as I got here. This is the next stage. Nothing up my sleeves. All of the other files are exactly the same. If I renamed the FWVNet, the FW policy, the FW.tf in my other repo and ran it, we would get an identical deployment. But I promise you don't want to watch maybe 35 minutes of that. So I ran it earlier. We're going to quickly talk about that. If I go through that gateway, I couldn't think that much of a halfway house. We've suddenly deployed a lot more resources. Things here. We're going to go to some other slides and build this out. Just the networking side of it. Azure Bastion. For anyone not, Bastion's what it sounds like. It's a means of accessing your virtual machines, in our case, the Bash shell, without having a public IP address. It's going to be easier to demonstrate and talk at depth. It's part of the Azure portal, so you can have all the snazzy, sexy things, have it behind MFA, not have to have port 22 presented to the outside world or RDP presented to the outside world and get access to your virtual compute that way. It's one of the resources that needs its own subnet, and it does need to be called Azure Bastion subnet. So in our first network, we've got to deploy a subnet. We're going to deploy Azure Firewall. That also needs its own subnet. I don't want pointing at my screen, sorry, that doesn't help you guys. I'll come over here this time. That subnet could come over to here. But what I did want to show was another very, very important construct. Where I've got my arrows, network peering. In the hierarchy, for want of a better word, it's not the official word, we have a virtual network which contains one or more subnets. They have to be in the same IP range. You can't have, say, a 10.0.0.0 virtual network and nothing else in that and have a 192.168 subnet. If you have a 10.0.0.0, 10.0.0.0/16 network, you would have something like a 10.0.1.0/24 subnet, for example. I'm not going to go further into the depths of TCP/IP there. Does that make sense that subnet exists within virtual network on the same IP range? All good. The reason for putting firewall in there is that's a very, very common construct. We'll call that hub and spoke. Now, we've got firewall in our hub virtual network. We've only got one spoke, but this in terms of the enterprise level is a very common way of achieving network segmentation, network separation, departmental, depends on the organization. And for virtual networks cannot speak to each other by default unless we do something. And that something is called peering. And I was talking about NSGs, network security groups, as being a very, very critical construct. Peering is also a very, very critical construct. Otherwise, hubs and spokes can't speak. So because we run the code, actually, let's carry on with that. And we'll come back to the code. So that's all our network resources. There's things we need before we deploy a Bastion or a firewall. Bastion host, I thought this was bizarre when I was first learning about it, needs a public IP address. It's not visible to you, but you must have one. You're connecting to Bastion via the portal, as I'll show you. If we're going to send traffic via a firewall, we need to route our TCP/IP traffic. And route table is a separate resource in the Azure world. Our firewall needs a public IP to talk to the public internet. And doesn't have to be, you can bind one-to-one your firewalls to the firewall, but the recommended way now of doing this is to separate out as a separate resource firewall policy. So we have to define all those things before we stick in this subnet, a Bastion host, and an Azure firewall in this subnet. And I didn't draw it previously, we're all operating one resource group. So I've actually drawn that around here. Anyway, let us go to the right VS Code. Oh, we've blown away in this instance on that gateway. If we simply change the tip, that will remove it. If we run, that doesn't exist in the Terraform code anymore. So again, Terraform code, we're defining a virtual network for our firewall. We're defining a subnet. It must be called Azure Firewall subnet. Peering goes in each direction. We're peering hub to spoke, spoke to hub. Defining in here a very, very simple firewall policy. And your eyes will glaze over, possibly even more than that. Azure Firewall is a full layer 7 enterprise firewall. It's vast. We're not going to do more than scrape this. There's a lot of reading. John Sowell does an excellent talk about it. If you want to have a look at it, fire it up and have a look. Put some compute on the side, either side, and see what you can do. You can use it for north-south traffic, either in you to the internet, or fire up another spoke, so-called east-west traffic, and try out the rules. This is where Terraform and IaC really comes into its own. It's an expensive resource. I've put this in my repo notes in the README. If you fire up a firewall in particular, it's not like $5.50 US an hour. It will mount up. Do a Terraform destroy or blow away your resource group. Only deploy it for when you're wanting to have a look at it. You can extend that into your pipelines. If you want to have a dev firewall, for example, script deploying it, don't pay for it 24/7. That's absolutely mad. Script the compute within the networks. You want to test your firewall rules, have them gather up the logs afterwards, blow away the whole lot and don't pay for it. So we've got this thing for proof of concept and playing and learning that extends really nicely into pipelines and not paying for resources. Remember that cost is one of the important pillars. So we've got a public IP address. We're not going to go there yet. We get to actually deploying a firewall. I put the route table in here because it allowed me to use variables that weren't defined when this was called a dot stage. It perhaps doesn't logically belong in here, but firewall has to have a public IP. We need to tell things to route to it. It's a very, very simple. All we're doing is routing internet traffic. We don't have more than one spoke. We're not doing any east-west traffic. And I've got some commented out rules I was playing with. And we're only associating the route table with, sorry, that's a route table association with one subnet. And we'll see the impact of that. Okay, that's all deployed. That is in, not there. It's all of our deployed resources. We sort those in order. Going to go to our non-public IP address host. And we're not going to SSH via Cloud Shell. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Use Azure Bastion. I was going to show you where you could grab a key from a key vault, but I'm using the cheapest SKU of Azure Bastion because I'm paying for it. Trust me, it would be in there if I'd used I think it's the standard SKU. I forget what the SKUs are called. There'd be an option to do that. As it is, we're just going to have to use the password. Whoa.
There is a pop-up that you have to enable. On the top.
Where are we? Thank you. I think I got my password right this time. I did have the wrong password as well.
Earl.
It's all falling apart. Let's do that. But it's a bit more. We don't have the nice color coding. This is on a new line. If we go back to Firewall public IP, and it's 239.173. Huzzah. So is the connection clear between deploying a route table, saying go to our Azure firewall and using that public IP? Remember how I had commented out in my code? So that doesn't run, associating the route table with one of the subnets. Look at that in a slightly different way. Let's find network interface. You see, we now have default that we saw previously is invalid, and we've got a user-defined route. And again, obviously, this is very, very simple exercise. You can, if we had genuine east-west traffic, you'd see a lot more in there. This is the word I'm looking for. Is quite a basic way of doing it. There is a resource called Azure Virtual WAN, which is really a managed hub virtual network, and will take a lot of the hard work out of doing this for you. However, under the hood, it's doing exactly this. So in terms of, for a demo, I didn't want to use a virtual WAN, not just my own type, what it is my own subscriptions. But in an enterprise system, you probably wouldn't do it this way. You'd probably use the Azure Virtual WAN. But if we go to this, Nick, remembering that I commented out in my code the association of the route table, no, not security rules, sorry, effective routes, you'll still see the default. So this particular host would bypass the Azure firewall because of that lack of association of the route table, and access the internet via its public IP address. Remember, we blew away the NAT gateway. Right.
Another. Well, another one in addition.
Yeah.
You go back to your Bastion bounce session.
Sure. There, no, let me. There we go.
You type in who, like, did they show you the LAN IP of Bastion or?
What am I typing to?
Yeah. At this stage, you're not actually on the Bastion.
No,
Actually on the
yeah.
virtual machine.
Yeah, say 10.0.3.5, is that the Bastion internal IP?
I mean, probably, yeah.
I think so, yeah,
But it's not-
because we're
So there's no, it just. Yeah. Like, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
we better take those chocolates home.
Yeah, so
Have one.
so traffic comes in through the web browser, gets terminated in Azure, and then I guess a secure private connection goes to Bastion, which plugs into your network, and then across from there, it'll connect to the host that you're trying to connect.
On my figuring out and reading list is, I don't actually understand why a Bastion has to have a public IP address. It's not what we're looking at. I'll figure it out and report back.
Well, probably because your web browser would have to connect to it somehow. Like what you're doing now.
Yes, yeah, that's probably it. Okay. Everything together. Flown through a lot of demos. The intention wasn't to do a deep dive. Let's say, if you're interested in infrastructure as code, and if you're working in this space, you really, really should be. Please don't use ClickOps. It's a terrible way to go. Try it out. I skirted over what you need to do it. Again, Wayne does a beautiful course on this, so I hope you're listening, Wayne. Spruiking all your stuff. Essentially, the only things on this laptop to do that are the Azure CLI and kept up to date, and Terraform kept up to date. Authenticate in the Azure CLI, have your Terraform code in a directory. That's all is needed to do this. Right, you obviously need an Azure subscription. In doing these demos, I'll probably spend $10 or $15 a month in my figuring out of things, which I can also do at work if I need. But this is really my own study, my own continuous learning. So zooming through all of those so you can see what can be done. That's the end of the talk. I'm going to say, any questions? Thank you very, very much for listening. I really don't want to take those time. It's not a reflection on the questions. Very important, whether work or personal. Very important you put the cursor where you need it, particularly in a firewall that's got a firewall.
You didn't save the file though.
No matter. I'm going to blow this repo away. Not blow this copy of it away. This one still needs a password, but I can just, because we're doing a destroy, doesn't have to catch up. I'm going to remove all of my deployed resources. Again, we were talking about before the meet about PaaS and re-architecting things before you go to cloud. Really, as a minimum, you say it's the same in any virtualization, but architect so that you separated your data from your compute, so that you can do things like this and blow it away when you want to, or upgrade it. I'm thinking of talks that you've done, Bernie, particularly in the as a web app or function space. You want to be able to blow your compute, your web app or your function away and abstract your data, and you only really have to worry about it if you change your data schema at that point.
Yep.
Wow. Well, thanks, Alastair. That was a awesome presentation.
Thank you,
Really
Dan.
appreciate our speakers. So thanks, Alastair. Did you have anything else you can say? Good. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Do catch up with us next month, again, the second Wednesday of the month. We got a talk coming up about Azure workbooks. So yeah, it's going to be a really good one. The only thing I ask you about tonight when you leave is if you could please take any of your bottles or anything out and bring them outside. And it doesn't look like anybody's done much shifting, but if you've moved your chair anywhere significant, just put it back where it was, because our condition of us using the room is that we leave it set up for the event tomorrow. So, have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.